We're gonna take a shape and cut it out on the CNC plasma cutter. The first thing to know is that you can use any 3D drawing software as long as you can export a DXF, and you want to work in inches. You can either convert to inches at the end, or you can just work in inches the entire time, but we've got the machine set up for inches, so if you draw in centimeters, you're gonna see it convert your image and make it very large. So I'm just gonna make a 2-inch shape here, hit Shift Z and zoom in on it. I'm gonna give it 8 sides, 8S, hit return, Shift Z to fit it on the screen. Now make sure the shape isn't tilted at all, so you're looking at camera, standard view top, and you don't need any kind of fill, you can just have outlines. So then we're gonna export file, export 2D graphic, and make sure it's a DXF file, and I'll just call it 8-sided shape. And again, any software as long as you can get a DXF file. And then we need to just put it on a disk or onto the server so we can get it over to the plasma computer. Okay, a few safety things first. I want to have some gloves nearby because when I finish cutting a piece, it's going to be hot. If I go to grab it, I'm actually going to burn my fingers, so I'm going to keep that handy. And then I've got to have some kind of glasses. You cannot look directly at the plasma beam coming out of the end of the cutter. It's going to hurt your eyes quite a bit, and in fact, over time, it could cause a level of blindness. And then know that the plasma cutter itself has a breakaway head, and that needs to be securely attached or it's not going to work properly. And that's so that you can't actually run into a piece of metal that's sticking up and ruin the end of it. So then keep your hands away from anything moving, don't be in here at all while it's running. And then the stop switch is on the far side of the machine. If things are going wrong, just hit that switch. You can turn it on and off using the stop, emergency stop. It's always better to hit that when in doubt. And then, yeah, finally, just be aware that sheet metal's quite sharp, so you just want to be careful loading it in the machine, getting it out. And then you're going to notice there's a lot of water here. This is to, it gets rid of the smoke. So if your water table is too low, you're going to see more smoke, so you want to make sure to turn on the ventilation. And if your water table is all the way full, you'll see almost no smoke. So you can always add more water to this. Sometimes you just want to be right up to the top of these bars here. I'm going to take my file off of the server, move it to the local computer. And then we want to open the software here. There's 2 Torchmate shortcuts. You want to open up the black icon. The other one's for editing your file, but I would do my editing actually in the 3D drawing program I'm using. And then it's going to ask you to connect to the plasma cutter. Now, I was able to connect because I've already turned it on, but you need to look behind the monitor here. There's a power strip. Make sure this power strip's turned on. If it's turned off, you're not going to be able to connect. And when you're finished cutting, you should go ahead and shut that power strip off. And then I'm going to hit agree to the safety. And then I'm going to open my file. Just go here to File and Import, not Open, but Import DXF. And there's my 8-sided shape. And then it's going to immediately prompt me to resave it as G-code. G-code is the code that tells the X, Y, and Z stepper motors where to put the plasma head. And so I'm just going to keep the same name and save that G-code file. And then there's a number of settings that are going to control how quickly how quickly the plasma head moves across the material and so on. You don't need to change anything as long as you're cutting 16 gauge steel. If you want to do some other kind of cutting, you need to check with your instructor. Alright, there's my file, and it's all set to go. I'm going to go ahead and position the head. Here's the jog screen, so for positioning the head and the X, Y, and Z, X and Y axes, the Z I'm not actually going to be able to control. And then over here, this is the unit that allows you to turn the plasma cutter on and off. So that's plasma on, plasma off. For testing my location, I want to make sure the plasma is off, so that way I can do a dry run without having the cutting head on. Okay, it's time for me to turn the plasma cutter on, so my switch is right here. And I want to make sure my amperage dial is set to 40 amps. And then there's a dial below that. You want to make sure, there's 4 positions, you want to make sure it's in the 3rd position. It should be there. There's no reason why anyone should change that. And then in the software, there's a button here. I've already clicked on it, but it says jog. And so that allows you to move the head of the plasma on the XY axis. So I want to move it to a spot where I can cut out my particular shape. Now this is a scrap piece of steel. You always want to try to use your steel wisely, cut out of areas that are going to be kind of as small as you need, so the next person can use the steel and use as much of it as they need. So I'm just going to cut out at the top here, and I'm just going to position my head right about where I think. Now it's going to cut from the lower corner of the shape, so I actually want to be a little bit closer to the front, a little bit more off to the side here. Alright, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a dry run. I'm not going to actually start plasma cutting yet. I'm just going to make sure my piece is going to fit. So back in my software here, I'm going to click on this button that says G-code, and I want to set my G-code location to 0. I want to 0 all my XY, so it says, do you want to program, or 0 all your XY program coordinates? I'm going to say yes. And on my G-code, I'm going to hit reset just to make sure I'm starting from the beginning of the G-code. And so we're all set to cut. Again, this is just going to be a test run to make sure my piece will fit. So I'm going to hit the start button here on the software. Okay, so I went off the edge just a little bit. Okay, so I need to move it on the Y coordinate just a touch. Alright, now I'm going to reset my G-code one more time, and I'm going to reset 0 all my coordinates just like I showed you a second ago. And let's see one more time. Is this time going to work? Is it going to work this time? Alright, that looks great. I am ready to cut. Okay, I just want to reset my G-code, make sure that it's at its starting point, and make sure that the X and Y are zeroed out. So I do that here. Program is set to 0, G-code reset, and then to start cutting, I'm going to hit the start button. Once again, just a reminder, when you're ready to cut, this red light's got to be on. Alright, that's it. Now you can see the piece just fell right out into the water bed, so I'm going to have to reach down in there to get it. But again, I'm going to put some gloves on just so I don't get cut, and so I don't get, you know, it might be hot. And there's my finished piece. The cuts are pretty good. You can grind off, you can chisel off or grind off the very edge. And then of course you'll need to seal it in some way because it will start to rust.